The moment Patricia Burke told herself she wouldn't fall for another unavailable man, she walked straight into Yates Henderson's office and felt her resolve crumble like day-old bread. It wasn't supposed to be this way. She was there to photograph his yacht collection for Maritime Lifestyle magazine, a straightforward assignment that should have taken 3 hours maximum. Instead, she found herself standing in his Manhattan penthouse office, staring at a man who looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne advertisement, complete with rolled-up sleeves and forearms that suggested he did more than sign checks all day. "Miss Burke." His voice carried the kind of authority that made grown men nervous and apparently made her knees weak. "I appreciate you coming on such short notice." Patricia adjusted her camera bag on her shoulder, forcing herself into professional mode. "Mr. Henderson, your assistant mentioned you wanted the shoot done before the regatta next month. Yates, please." He moved around his desk with an easy confidence that came from owning half the shipping companies on the eastern seaboard. "And yes, though I should warn you, the boats are in Connecticut." "I hope you don't mind the drive." She did mind. Not the drive, but the way her heart had picked up speed the moment he'd smiled at her. This was exactly the kind of complication she'd sworn off after her last relationship imploded. Daniel had been a lawyer with a wife he'd forgotten to mention for 6 months. Before that, Marcus had been emotionally unavailable in ways that required therapy to unpack. She'd promised herself the next man would be simple, uncomplicated, and absolutely not a billionaire with eyes that looked like stormy seas. "The drive is fine," she heard herself saying, because rent was due and this assignment paid triple her usual rate. They took his car, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. Patricia tried not to think about the leather seats or the way Yates drove with one hand on the wheel, completely relaxed despite the traffic that made her want to scream. He asked about her work, seemed genuinely interested when she explained how she'd fallen into maritime photography by accident after a sailing trip in Greece. "I was supposed to be photographing the wedding," she said, watching the city give way to countryside. "But I kept getting distracted by the boats in the harbor. The bride was furious, but one of the guests saw my shots and offered me my first commission." "When was this?" Yates glanced at her, and she tried not to notice the way the afternoon light caught his profile. 4 years ago. "I was 24 and had no idea what I was doing. And now I'm 28 and slightly more informed about my ignorance," he laughed, a genuine sound that made something warm unfurl in her chest. This was dangerous. She needed to remember that men like Yates Henderson didn't date women like her. They dated models and actresses and women who knew which fork to use at fancy dinners. Patricia could barely keep her studio apartment clean and lived on coffee and whatever didn't require more than one pot to make. The marina in Connecticut was stunning, all white wood and gleaming brass, with boats that looked like they belonged in museums rather than water. Yates owned 7 yachts, each one more impressive than the last, and he walked her through them with surprising knowledge about their histories and specifications. "This one's my favorite," he said, leading her onto a vintage sailing yacht that took her breath away. "Built in 1952, restored her myself over 3 years. Yourself." She couldn't hide her skepticism. "Well, I had help." His grin was boyish, completely at odds with the commanding presence he'd had in his office. "But I did most of the woodwork. My father thought I was crazy, spending my weekends sanding decks when I could have been networking at country clubs." Patricia began shooting, grateful for the excuse to look at him through a lens rather than directly. He moved around the boat with obvious affection, pointing out details she should capture, telling stories that made the vessels come alive. She found herself laughing more than working, which was unprofessional and exactly the problem. "You really love these," she observed, adjusting her aperture to catch the way the sunset lit up the brass fixtures. "They're simple." He leaned against the mast, looking out at the water. "Everything else in my life is complicated, but boats make sense. You maintain them, respect them, and they take you where you need to go." She lowered her camera. What's complicated? The question hung between them like a sail catching wind. Yates turned to look at her, and the expression on his face made her wish she hadn't asked. Everything, he said finally. The company, the expectations, the people who want things from me. Sometimes I think about selling it all and just sailing away. Why don't you? Because it's not that simple. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed unconscious and devastating in its casualness. I employ 3,000 people. My decisions affect their families, their futures. And then there's my mother, who has very specific ideas about what I should be doing with my life. Patricia started shooting again, capturing him in profile against the darkening sky. What does she think you should be doing? Getting married, producing heirs, joining the country club? He laughed, but it sounded hollow. She's introduced me to every eligible socialite on the East Coast. They're all lovely, accomplished women who would make perfect wives for someone, just not me. Why not? Because they want the idea of me, not the actual person. He met her eyes, and Patricia felt the impact like a physical thing. They want the billionaire, the status, the lifestyle. None of them have ever asked about the boats. She should have left it there, finished the shoot, collected her paycheck, and gone home to her small life. Instead, she heard herself say, "Tell me about the boats." They talked until the stars came out, sitting on the deck of his favorite yacht while the water lapped against the hull. Yates told her about learning to sail from his grandfather, about the summer he'd spent crewing on a fishing boat in Alaska to escape his father's expectations, about the dream he'd had as a kid of circumnavigating the globe. Patricia shared her own stories, about growing up in Vermont with more siblings than money, about her father who'd worked construction and taught her to see the beauty in things that were worn and weathered, about the camera he'd saved up to buy her for her 16th birthday that she still used sometimes. "We're too complicated," she said finally, as much to herself as to him. The words came out as a sigh, heavy with the weight of reality crashing back in. "You know that, right? This, whatever this is, it's too complicated." Yates looked at her for a long moment. "Because I have money. Because you have a life that doesn't have room for someone like me." She stood up, needing distance. "You have galas and business dinners and a mother who wants you to marry a socialite. I have a studio apartment in Queens and a student loan debt that will outlive me. We exist in completely different worlds. What if I don't want my world?" His voice was quiet but intense. "What if I want something real? Real is still complicated when you're a billionaire and I'm a photographer who sometimes eats cereal for dinner." He stood too, moving closer. "Patricia, I haven't stopped thinking about you since you walked into my office. I've been on dozens of dates with women who were supposed to be perfect for me, and I've never felt anything like what I felt today, just talking with you about boats." Her heart was doing acrobatics in her chest. "Yates, this is crazy, we just met." "I know." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with a gentleness that made her shiver. "But I'd like to get to know you better, if you'll let me." She should have said no. The smart, self-protective part of her brain was screaming at her to walk away before she got hurt again. But there was something in his eyes, a vulnerability that matched her own, that made her throw caution to the wind. "One date," she said. "But somewhere normal, not some five-star restaurant where I'll need to Google the menu." His smile could have lit up the entire marina. "Deal." Their first real date was at a pizza place in Brooklyn that Patricia had been going to since she moved to New York. Yates showed up in jeans and a simple button-down, and if people recognized him, they were too polite or too New York to care. They split a large pepperoni and argued good-naturedly about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. "It's fruit," Yates insisted. "It has no business on a savory dish." "It's sweet and salty, which is the perfect combination." Patricia stole the last slice. "You billionaires just don't appreciate innovation." "I appreciate plenty of innovation." He was watching her with an expression that made her feel like she was the only person in the room. "I'm here with you, aren't I? That's not innovation, that's temporary insanity on both our parts." But it didn't feel temporary. Over the next few weeks, they fell into a pattern that surprised both of them with its ease. Yates would finish work and meet her at whatever shoot she was doing, carrying her equipment and asking questions about her process. She started coming to his office for lunch, bringing sandwiches from the deli near her apartment because she insisted his catered corporate food had no soul. They went to a Yankees game where Yates admitted he hadn't been to a baseball game since he was 12. They browsed used bookstores in the village and argued about literature. They took the ferry to Staten Island just for the view and kissed for the first time with the Statue of Liberty in the background, and Patricia thought her heart might actually burst. "I'm falling for you," Yates said against her lips. "Just so you know." "That's the problem," she whispered back. But she kissed him again anyway. The complications started small. A missed date because Yates had an emergency board meeting that ran until midnight. A charity gala he had to attend where Patricia felt completely out of place in a borrowed dress. The photographers who caught them leaving a movie theater, and suddenly Patricia's face was on gossip websites with headlines speculating about the billionaire's mysterious new girlfriend. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Her mother called, confused and concerned. Her sister sent approximately 50 text messages ranging from excited to worried. An old friend from high school tried to reconnect after years of silence, and Patricia realized with a sick feeling that money changed everything, even when it wasn't yours. "I can't do this," she told Yates one evening in his apartment after another day of strangers recognizing her on the subway. "This isn't my life. I don't want to be famous for dating you." "You're not famous, the attention will die down." But he looked worried, like he'd been expecting this. "Your mother called me." Patricia hadn't planned to mention it, but the words came tumbling out. "She wanted to have lunch, said we should get to know each other." "Yates, she spent an hour telling me about the kind of woman you need, the kind of wife who could handle your lifestyle." She was polite, but the message was clear. "I'm not it." His jaw tightened. "My mother doesn't get to decide who I date." "But she's not wrong, is she?" Patricia felt tears threatening and hated herself for it. "I'm a photographer who lives paycheck to paycheck." "You're a billionaire with responsibilities to thousands of people. Eventually, you're going to need someone who fits into your world, and I never will." "Patricia, listen to me." Yates took her hands, his grip firm and warm. "I don't want someone who fits into my world. That world is suffocating. You make me feel like I can breathe." "That's not enough." She pulled away, wrapping her arms around herself. "What happens when you need me at some important dinner and I use the wrong fork? When your business partners think I'm not sophisticated enough? When you realize you're embarrassed to have me there? That would never happen." His voice was fierce. "You could never embarrass me. You can't know that." "Yes, I can." He moved closer, tilting her chin up so she had to meet his eyes. "Patricia Burke, you are the smartest, funniest, most genuine person I've ever met. You see me, not my bank account. You challenge me and make me laugh and make me want to be better. If anyone in my life has a problem with that, they can leave. Even your mother, even my mother." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the tip of her nose. "I'm not letting you go because other people are small-minded. We'll figure it out." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him. But doubt was a persistent thing, growing every time she saw another article about them, every time someone at one of his events looked at her like she didn't belong. The breaking point came at a shareholder dinner 2 months into their relationship. Patricia had bought a new dress, practiced her small talk, and given herself a pep talk in the bathroom mirror. She could do this. She could be what Yates needed, except she couldn't. The evening was a disaster from the moment they arrived, and a board member's wife asked what Patricia did, her tone making it clear that photographer wasn't a real career. Someone else confused her with the catering staff. A particularly drunk executive cornered her and suggested that Yates must be paying her bills, winking like they were sharing a secret. Patricia excused herself to the bathroom and called an Uber. She texted Yates that she wasn't feeling well and left before he could stop her. He showed up at her apartment at midnight, still in his tuxedo, looking furious and terrified in equal measure. "You left." It wasn't a question. I didn't belong there. Patricia was still in her dress, makeup smeared from crying. You didn't see the way they looked at me, Yates. Like I was some gold digger you'd picked up. I don't care what they think. But I do. The words came out louder than she intended. I care because eventually you're going to start seeing me through their eyes. You're going to realize they're right, that I'm not good enough for you. That's bullshit. Yates ran both hands through his hair, destroying whatever style it had held. Patricia, those people are miserable. They're trapped in loveless marriages and jobs they hate, and they can't stand seeing someone actually happy. Why would I care about their opinions? Because they're your world. No, they're my job, you're my world. He crossed the small space between them, cupping her face in his hands. I love you, do you understand that? I am completely, hopelessly in love with you, and I don't care if it's only been 2 months. I've never been more sure of anything. Patricia felt her carefully constructed walls crumbling. This is crazy, I know. We're from completely different places, I know. Your mother hates me, she'll get over it. He smiled, that devastating smile that had started all of this. Or she won't, and I'll limit Sunday dinners to holidays only. Patricia, I'm not giving you up, not for my mother, not for shareholders, not for anyone. You're it for me. I love you too, she whispered, because denying it was pointless. I've been trying not to, but I do, so much it scares me. Then be scared with me. He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. We'll figure out the complicated parts together, and somehow they did. It wasn't easy. There were more awkward dinners and more gossip columns, and a particularly painful Thanksgiving where Yates's mother made her disapproval clear in dozens of small ways. But there were also quiet mornings in Patricia's apartment, Yates making pancakes while she edited photos. There were sailing trips where they left the world behind for days at a time. There were nights when he showed up at her shoots with coffee and sat quietly in the corner, just wanting to be near her. 6 months in, Yates asked her to move in with him. Patricia said yes, but insisted on paying rent, which led to their first real fight when he said that was ridiculous. They compromised with her contributing what she could afford and him respecting that her independence mattered. She met his friends, the real ones, not the business associates. They were surprisingly normal, people he'd known since college who treated her like a person rather than an accessory. His best friend Marcus, a marine biologist who lived in worn jeans and made terrible puns, became one of her favorite people. Patricia took Yates home to Vermont for Christmas, where her large, loud family descended on him with the warmth of people who judged you on your character rather than your bank account. Her father spent an hour talking to him about boat restoration. Her mother fed him until he swore he couldn't eat another bite. Her siblings treated him like he was already part of the family. Your family is amazing, Yates said on the drive back to New York, holding her hand across the console. They really don't care about the money, do they? They care that you make me happy. Patricia squeezed his fingers. That you treat me right, that's all that matters to them. I'm going to marry you someday, he said casually, like he was commenting on the weather. Just so you know, her heart stopped. Yates Henderson, did you just propose while driving on the interstate? No, I'm just stating a fact. He grinned at her. When I actually propose, it'll be much more romantic, but I wanted you to know where this is going, if that's okay with you. That's okay with me, she managed, blinking back happy tears. The actual proposal came 3 months later on his favorite yacht under a sky full of stars. They'd sailed to a quiet cove off the coast of Maine, and Yates had cooked dinner while Patricia took sunset photos. Afterward, he'd pulled her close and told her about every moment he'd fallen more in love with her, from that first day at the marina to that morning when she'd stolen his coffee and called him grumpy. I know it's complicated, he said, sliding a ring onto her finger. The diamond was beautiful but not ostentatious, set in a band that looked antique. I know my life comes with challenges and publicity and a mother who's still not entirely convinced you're not after my fortune, but Patricia Burke, you make everything make sense. Will you marry me? Yes, she said through tears. Yes, absolutely yes. They got married 6 months later in Vermont, in the small church where Patricia had been baptized. It was nothing like the society wedding Yates's mother had envisioned. There was no ice sculpture or designer dress or guest list full of celebrities. Instead, there were wildflowers from Patricia's sister's garden, her father walking her down the aisle, Yates's college friends serving as groomsmen, and a reception in a barn where they danced until their feet hurt. Yates's mother came, and while she wasn't entirely warm, she cried during the ceremony when Yates's voice broke saying his vows. Maybe it was a start. "I wasn't sure complicated would be worth it," Patricia whispered during their first dance, her head on Yates's shoulder. "And now?" His arms tightened around her. "Now I know that complicated with you is better than simple with anyone else." They honeymooned on his boat, sailing down the coast with no schedule and no destination. Yates taught Patricia to navigate by the stars. She taught him to see light the way she did, to capture moments rather than just experience them. They made love under the open sky and talked about the future until the sun came up. Back in New York, they built a life that was uniquely theirs. Patricia kept her photography business, turning down the easy society jobs Yates's connections could have provided because she wanted to succeed on her own merit. Yates started spending more time on marine conservation, using his resources to fund projects he actually cared about rather than just chasing profit. They bought a house in Connecticut, close to the marina, with space for Patricia's studio and a workshop where Yates could work on boat restoration. It was smaller than people expected a billionaire to live in, but it was theirs. Yates's mother slowly came around, especially after Patricia spent an afternoon teaching her to use a camera and listening to stories about Yates as a boy. They'd never be best friends, but they reached an understanding built on their mutual love for the same man. A year into their marriage, Patricia's career took off after a series she'd done on climate change's impact on coastal communities went viral. She was offered a book deal, speaking engagements, assignments that would have seemed impossible a few years ago. Through it all, Yates was her biggest supporter, managing her schedule when things got overwhelming, reminding her to eat when she got lost in editing, celebrating every success like it was his own. "I'm proud of you," he told her after her book launch, which had been packed with people who wanted to hear her speak. "You did this all on your own, not on my own." Patricia pulled him close, surrounded by the controlled chaos of the party. "You've been with me every step." "Always will be," he promised. 2 years into their marriage, they started talking about kids. Patricia was terrified she wouldn't be a good mother, that she'd screw up a child with her own anxieties and insecurities. Yates confessed he was scared of becoming his father, distant and focused on business rather than family. "We'll figure it out," Patricia said, echoing the words that had become their unofficial motto. Together. Their daughter was born on a stormy October evening, arriving 3 weeks early and screaming her displeasure at the world. They named her Adelaide Rose, and Yates cried when he held her for the first time, this tiny person who was half him and half the woman he loved. Being parents was harder than either of them expected and better than they'd dreamed. Yates scaled back his hours at the company, delegating more so he could be present for diaper changes and midnight feedings and the thousands of small moments that made up a life. Patricia worked from home more, her studio filled with baby equipment and the sound of Adelaide's laughter. Yates's mother became an unexpected ally, showing up with advice and casseroles and genuine affection for her granddaughter. She told Patricia she'd been wrong about her, that she could see now that Patricia was exactly what Yates needed. "You make him happy," she said one afternoon, watching Yates show Adelaide a picture book about boats. "I wanted someone who would fit our world, but you gave him permission to create his own." When Adelaide was 6 months old, they took her on her first sailing trip. She screamed for the first hour and then fell asleep in Yates's arms, lulled by the motion of the waves. Patricia captured it on camera, this moment of perfect peace with her family. "We did good," Yates said, looking from their sleeping daughter to Patricia. "We did great," she corrected, leaning in to kiss him. They had another baby 2 years later, a son they named Henry James, who was the spitting image of his father. Adelaide was a devoted big sister, constantly trying to help in ways that were more hindrance than help, but filled with so much love it made Patricia's heart ache. Life wasn't perfect. There were still complications, still moments when Patricia felt out of place at business functions, still times when Yates's responsibilities pulled him away from family. But they'd learned to navigate it together, to prioritize what mattered, to remember why they'd chosen each other in the first place. On their 5th anniversary, Yates surprised her with a boat of her own, a small sailing yacht perfect for photography expeditions. The name painted on the hull made her cry, "Perfectly complicated." "Because that's what we are," he said, pulling her into his arms while their kids played on the deck. "Complicated in all the best ways." Patricia thought back to that first day at the marina, to her certainty that getting involved with Yates Henderson would be a mistake. She'd been right about the complicated part. Everything about their life together required work and compromise and navigating challenges she never could have anticipated. But she'd been wrong about it not being worth it. Every complicated moment, every challenge they'd faced, every time they'd had to choose each other over the easy path, had led them here. To a life full of love and laughter and 2 beautiful children. To a partnership that was stronger because it had been tested. To a love that had only grown deeper with time. "I wouldn't change a thing," she whispered against his chest, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Not even the complicated parts?" Yates pressed a kiss to the top of her head, "especially not the complicated parts." Patricia looked up at him, this man who'd turned her world upside down and then made it better than she'd imagined possible. "They're what made us us." Adelaide ran over, demanding to be picked up, and Henry toddled after his sister with the determination of a child who refused to be left behind. Yates scooped up both kids while Patricia grabbed her camera, capturing the moment with the practiced ease of someone who'd learned to hold love in her hands. Later that night, after the kids were asleep and they were alone under the stars, Yates pulled Patricia close. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For taking